Hello everyone. I am Dr. Rajiv Tutoda. I work with Department of Economics, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong campus. The topic that we're going to discuss today is effect of increasing investment and export and deficiencies of foreign trade multiplier. Basically, here we're going to talk about how the effect that is an increase in investment and export through foreign trade multiplier. Okay, multiplier as the concept involved is basically how and changes in any of these two variables leads to a multiple increase in income, and then we also like end up this discussion by focusing on the limitations on of the concept. Okay, foreign trade multiplier. So this, as the name suggests, this foreign trade, right? So we're going to talk about an open economy, and here I want to recapitulate what we discussed in the previous two lectures. Here, basically, in open economy, we talk about not just in saving and investment, but also export and import. Okay, and an economy we talk about in an equilibrium sense. Okay, an economy will be in equilibrium when total injection total injection is equal to total leakages. Okay, and if there is some changes in injection, then that has to be matched by total leakages. Okay, or either way around. Okay, so but it has to be in equilibrium. We always need to satisfy the condition of I plus x is equal to m plus s. Okay, so basically change in investment is equal to or change in investment plus change in export is equal to change in saving plus change in import. But at the same time, we also need to keep in mind that change in investment need not match exactly with change in savings. Okay, basically saving and investment, they do not need to match exactly in equilibrium. So maybe if in like by coincidence at one point of time we may have saving is equal to investment, but then next equilibrium we may not have exactly the change in saving is equal to change in investment. So that has to be matched by, but at the same time that has to be matched by basically change in the other two components, so that in summation we have change in investment plus change in export is equal to change in saving plus change in import. Okay, and this the effect of changes in investment or export need to be or can be explained by foreign trade multiplier. Okay, if we recall, initially we discussed with changes in autonomous investment. Okay, and how that affects the changes in income. Okay, and this was basically gain chain multiplier. Okay, how change in investment leads to changes in initial production, right, and that leads to like people getting engaged in those production process, then they getting income, and that income basically leads to basically expenditures by them, which becomes someone else's income, and then it creates a virtuous cycle, right? And this cycle operates in a multiple cycles, and finally the increase in income that we get to see is a much more than the initial increase in the investment. Okay, and this is something that we discuss when we talk about gains and multiplier in a closed economic concept, right? But then once you open up to a open economy, so then we introduce one more injection. It is not just through investment that in fact we can visualize a more dynamic economy, or like say an expanding economy, also through export. Okay, so basically the job that is done through this change in investment can be also done through the changes in export, because when there's an autonomous increase in export, why we talk about autonomous? Because it is independent of our income. Okay, it is something that is coming from outside, right? So when there's an autonomous increase in export, so then that leads to production inside the increased production inside the economy, that leads to people getting job, then they spending, and which becomes someone else's income. So basically this also operates, this injection in the form of export operates exactly in the same way as changes in investment. And so this can be also explained, I mean, through the diagram. Okay, here if you see in the y-axis we measure the income. Okay, and in the y-axis we basically vertical axis we measure the leakages, okay, leakages as well as injection, okay, I plus X and S plus M. S plus M means saving and saving plus import, and I plus X means investment plus export. Okay, and so here injection is basically I plus X and leakage is saving plus import. Okay, and our leakages are basically function of income. Once we report increase in income, then this savings as it being a function of income increases, okay, in a certain proportion, and import also increases in certain proportion. Okay, but when we talk about injection, we always talk about injection in an autonomous sense. Basically, it's independent of income. It might be investment undertaken by government, or it may be export that is coming from outside the countries. Okay, so we first draw this line, investment line, which is basically parallel to the x-axis. Okay, it's independent. That's investment of 150 that we have shown there in the diagram in the y-axis, right? So that is basically independent of our level of income, and that's why it is basically parallel to the x-axis. Okay, but then we started our saving function with basically from minus 100. Okay, it's below the origin. Okay, that is basically we are basically when we do not have any income, the income is zero, and that means we need to still consume something, which leads to this saving. That's why we started with minus 100. But then there will be a certain income which is, as you can see, less than 500 equilibrium income. But here you can see saving is exactly intersecting the national income, right? And so there is no saving basically, but there is also no negative this saving basically. Okay, but after a certain point you have a positive savings getting reported as income increases. Okay, and then we superimpose one import function on top of this saving. Okay, and which appears as a saving plus import, and that is not parallel to the saving curve, because import has its own propensity, right? It is not the same as saving. Okay, and that's why they diverge over time as income increases. Okay, because we are superimposing that import function with a different saving propensity, different responsiveness to income compared to saving. So we have Sy plus My that is coming with a different slope compared to only saving curve. Okay, so that is Sy plus My, and then we are talking about now export. We are basically imposing export on top of investment. Investment line, as I already said, is a parallel to the x-axis because it is autonomous, independent of income, and export is also, you can visualize in the same way. Basically, since export is someone else import, right? Some other countries import, and it's independent of income. So we just simply superimpose, say, like 300 units of export on top of this 150 investment. Okay, so this is basically parallel to the x-axis. Okay, I plus x, which is 450. Okay, so this is, let us say, is a initial position. We have I plus x intersecting with Sy plus My. So that is, you can see, is a initial equilibrium level. Okay, that is intersecting at point E, and our equilibrium income is 100. Okay, and at this point, if you see where Sy is intersecting with investment line is at point J. Okay, so that means we have like the equilibrium point, that corresponding point, we have saving is exactly equal to investment at point J. Okay, so that means, and then since total injection is equal to total leakage, so this is also a point where we have export is exactly equal to import. So we have both saving equal to investment, and we have a current account equilibrium. Okay, there is neither the trade balance positive or negative. It's just trade is in balance. Export is equal to import. But now we are trying to see basically what if there is an increase in export. Okay, and this increase in export is by, say, let us say we assume that 200 units. So that means we now expand, we now push this export line and do, like, say, I plus x dash. Okay, now we have an increase in export. So, and what is its effect? So this export is increasing by 200 units, right? 450 to 650. And so what is basically like the impact on the equilibrium income? Then you can see, okay, this I plus X dash is intersecting with the saving plus import line, SY plus MY at E dash. And then we draw a line parallel to the y-axis, and we basically make it touch the x-axis, and see we basically what is the now new equilibrium, that is 1500. So basically we have now change in income, which is basically like 500, right? And then we try to see like so whether now saving is equal to investment. No, we have this saving line, which saving point, which is now lying above the investment. So that means now saving is more than investment. Okay. So so that means we have now import is basically less than export. Okay. And so we have now, you can say, trade balance is favorable to us, or you can say current account surplus. Okay. So this is in a sense, basically you can see how the the effect, positive effect of changes in export leading to an expansion of income, and that operates through basically this foreign trade multiplier. It exemplified through the foreign trade multiplier. But now, if you ask me, how does it operate? Because once you have an increase in export, right, that is probably some other countries are having a favorable macroeconomic situation. Their income is growing, and they are increasing their import from country like India, which means an export reported by changes in export reported by India, and that leads to the increase in the production of those farms which are basically exporting their products. That means there's an increased employment, right? And then that leads to basically those people spending more money on purchase of the goods that they need, and that creates an income from some other people who are basically from whom these people are buying. Okay, this is basically a virtuous cycle, and leading to an finally increase in income, which is more than the initial export volume. And how much is the amount of export, that the amount of increase in income is going to be determined by basically the foreign trade multiplier. Okay, and which is here in the context of this example is 2.5 times. Okay, but then now you just you can also extend this argument in an opposite way. Like, let us say there is a sudden slump in demand in other countries. Okay, so because probably we are doing fine as a country, but then probably other countries are reporting decline in income, which then leads to basically they are importing less than before. Okay, that means our now export has suffered. In that context, then we will have this export line slipping to basically I plus X double dash. Okay, so then in that case we will have this line like intersecting this I plus X double dash line intersecting with SY plus MY line at E double dash, and here we will have now equilibrium income, which is 500. Okay, and now we have investment line basically lying above saving line. So basically we have now investment being more than saving. That means we have import being more than the export. Okay, we will have now current account deficit. Okay, because suddenly we have, like other countries scenario, we have a scenario now, other countries suffering from some kind of a contraction, leading to less income, leading to less import, and then which means less export for us. And then we also started like feeling the heat, and then that it works in a opposite way, and we have a new equilibrium, which is 500. So basically the one that works for us when there's an increase in export operates exactly the opposite way when we have a decline in export. Okay, so this is in a nutshell what we discussed now, that effect of increase in export, right, and how it basically operates and it affects the national income. But I also like introduce the other case studies of basically decline in export, and then to make the point clear. Okay, the same mechanism operates when we have an increase in export, just that in the opposite way. Okay. But now that we are done with these case studies, we also now need to see like do we really always see operating this whole concept like we explained, or we may not see that? I mean, that depends on basically how we define this percentage multiplier, and also what kind of assumptions that we make. Okay, because the concept that we discuss in economics always involve a simplified model, which is basically nothing but doing away with the complexities that we always see in the real world, and so that we can basically focus narrowly on the things that we want to see. Okay, that means we always make certain assumptions. Okay, and so if these assumptions are very strong assumptions and too many assumptions, then of course that also means we also have some limitations of the model. Okay, so let us just quickly recapitulate the assumptions that we made. So there's the assumption of full employment in domestic economy, and then direct link between domestic and foreign country in exporting and importing goods, and then the country is small with no foreign repercussion, right? And then fixed effect rate system is followed by the country, right? And then multiplier is also, there is no time lag involved in the multiplier process. Okay, and there is no accelerator. I think the students can recall what is exactly accelerator. Accelerator is basically nothing but because what we have discussed in the context of multiplier is investment leading to changes in expenditure. But changes in expenditures by people concerned, they consume more. But those changes in consumption or expenditures also have an effect on basically investment. So that means then the concept is basically we have a more magnified effect, right? Because not only investment leads to change in consumption, but then that consumption also has its effect back on investment. Okay, basically it can be accentuated. This effect can be accentuated. Okay, and then what we are talking about also is the assumption is that there is no tariff barrier, and basically we managed to capture this trade flows only through our model, and there is no non-tariff and tariff barriers. Okay, and then domestic investment also constant, and government expenditure is also constant, and then analysis is applicable to only two countries. So some of these assumptions are basically very strong assumptions, and if those assumptions are violated, then we may not basically see the exact replica of what we discussed being played out. Okay, it is still it's still relevant to understand the issue at hand, but then many times if we do not see things going the way that model has predicted, then that means some of these assumptions are not valid. So when we discuss about these deficiencies of foreign trade multiplier as a concept, so we need to look at these assumptions, and let us discuss few of these. Okay, the first thing is that we always make an assumption that a rise in export always lead to increase in national income, but that is not necessarily true. Okay, because we live in a very complex world, and a rise in export may also lead to a rise in import. Okay, and so then they may also cancel out many times. Okay, in fact we recently we realized that many of our export production have components which needs to be imported, Okay, so and then things are not as simple. And if that is the case, things are not as simple as we visualize. Okay, and also sometimes looking at, like, say, import is always a leakage and export is something which is always an injection. That is also a little bit of too simplified take on the complex global trading system. Because if you look at something like, just to give an example, this import may be some capital good, right? Basically, if it's a capital good import, then it can lead to basically the expansion of production capacity, and which may result in export. Okay, in fact, we can give an example of, like, recently in the wake of COVID-19, we have a popular mandate that we should ban the import from China, but later we realized that many of our products, like, which constitute our very dominant export basket, right? Something like, say, pharmaceutical products and all, they have many components which come from China. Actually, So basically now in a global value chain, no product is totally produced from like stage one to the final stage within one country. It basically moved from one country to another, and then the visualize in that context, visualizing export is always an injection, and import is something which is a leakage, is a kind of an oversimplified picture. And also now we have something like export and investment. These are both basically is an injection, right? And they are, you can say, is basically is an injection, right? But then they are kind of autonomous, not dependent on national income. That also basically is a little bit oversimplified picture, okay? Because export may be basically dependent on an investment, and they are also interrelated, and also probably they also have something like that. Just to give an example, right? If you have like India is doing good in like they are probably importing from the other countries, okay, and then that import may basically leads to rise in income of other countries, and then that may leads to rise in export for us as well, okay, or investment maybe also, like say if we have an investment, then we have an increase in income. That income, some part of that may be invested in or spent on import from other countries, and that country basically then have witness or have may witness rise in income, which may translate into basically increase in import, which is our export. So basically, the initial investment and export, which we assume to be independent, and that's why we draw one among on top of the others, and as parallel to x-axis, is a little bit of oversimplification. Okay, full employment, we always assume this like full employment scenario when we talk about multiplier, so that if there's something happens, then it leads to a full phase of production, new production, and then we have a new basically employment happening, and new cycle of income and spending happening. But what if we do not have a full employment scenario? That means the farms are already sitting with excess production inventories, and which is often the case we see nowadays. Many times we see like banks trying to basically woo the farms to take loan from them, but then with a very less interest rate. But then farms do not do that because they're already sitting with excess capacity with productions, inventories, right? And which then now, which can be, which is only because of scenario of not so full employment scenario. And if that is the case, then this foreign trade multiplier, that extent of increase in income, right? If you see 200 increase in export leading to 500 increase in the annual income, is like no, it may not play out. It may be probably 200 increase in export leading to probably 100 or 300, 200 increase in the income, if the farms which are exporting are already having excess production. They just sell their products, and there's no further effect on in terms of employment, right? So, and that is quite possible. And similarly, like but sometimes it may be also the other way around. We may have increase in consumption leading to a further increase in investment, okay, because that is concept of accelerator. So this again, this may be done away. This is actually done assumed away, just like Keynesian multiplier, where we do not discuss about the accelerator concept. So since this foreign trade multiplier as a concept is again an extension of what we discuss, extension of the Keynesian multiplier. So the same lacuna of ignoring and another cycle of effect through accelerator happening, right? That is basically ignored. Okay, so it suffers from the same kind of problem. And then we have also we are not discussing or not talking much about monetary and fiscal measures. Okay, so we just assume that all the interventions are happening only through export or import. Okay, we are assuming away this the government interventions. Okay, but once we bring those back in the picture, then we may not imagine the kind of scenario that is being played through this foreign trade multiplier. Okay, so just to give an example, like say probably government is while we are witnessing export, government is probably trying to deal with something like say inflationary situations. Okay, So then to deal with that, government probably may raise the interest rate. Once it raises the interest rate, then probably it will like, I mean, make production more expensive, right? Then we may not be so competitive in the international economy, or maybe then we have also foreign capital coming into our economy. Then we have exchange rate appreciation. So all kind of possibilities may happen, and similarly fiscal measures also, right? If government basically say like trying to push the economy by using a lax fiscal measures, so then probably people will have more income, right? And then they may also, since like import is a function of income, so then people may also demand import. So then probably we cannot also no, so then effect of export is also negated by an increase in import. So these are all basically possibilities which are kept in check by all these strong assumptions. And then another is basically we are talking about like uh, unrealistic assumptions of barrier-free trade. Like it is as if like the moment the other country's income increases, and we are going to witness an increase in export, or probably same is the case with import. But then this is not so true. I mean, we have we have seen it now in the recent period talk about increasingly talk about the countries using the tariff to protect their domestic productions. Okay, so if there's a lot of trade barriers, then the foreign trade multiplier concept has some problems. Okay, because we may not witness an autonomous increase in export or probably import to the extent, right? Because every country is basically finally bound by the political economy of employment. I mean, we need to basically, it's a democracy. Like now we have most countries are basically facing democracy, are having democracy, and they have to deal with domestic employment as a priority. Okay, I mean, and that may demand putting barriers of trade. Okay, barriers of trade, so that your production is protected, your employment is protected. So in such a world, I mean, basically, yeah, in fact, that is something that is now been increasingly recognized as a deglobalization. Okay, till now we discuss about globalization, right? We are moving towards a border-free trade, but barrier-free trade. But now that is not the case. I mean, we have now increasingly countries resorting to protect their market, protect their economy, and raising tax tariff in the process. Okay, look at recent elections in US or most countries, including India also, like raising the employment. I mean, is a big political issue now. We discussed this foreign trade multiplier concept in the context of two countries. Okay, that is again also a simplified thing. Okay, I mean simplified assumptions. Actually, trade may and often involve basically more than two countries. Especially if a country specializes in the production of only one particular product, say like garment. So then, just take the example of Bangladesh. Bangladesh cannot just keep focusing on exporting their garment, which is probably like the only things that they do, to only one country. Okay, it always involves many countries. And then finally, to basically end this class, we talk about foreign trade multiplier as a concept. It is basically, it's a very static concept. Okay, we keep too many things under check, and we talk about only two country. We talk about fixed exchange rate. We assume away these foreign trade repercussions, and so concept that we discuss is that the result that we get is a little bit too simplified. And but then the complex real world, I mean, where politics also has its own component, like its own influence. So we cannot assume. So then we have also is a, like we can say, is a very complex picture of repercussion effect playing out, right? Something like, say, we have like, no, I mean, if we like something goes wrong, or what we try to do, like if we focus too much on, say, export, and then if it focuses only on, say, say other countries like say suffer some changes in fortunes, then it hit back on us. Okay, so the concept is relevant only if that particular country of that particular case study is a very small country, and then what it doesn't affect the other countries much. Okay, so then it is applicable. But once the fortunes of other countries hit back on us, so then this foreign trade multiplier concept has limitation to capture the complex dynamics that we see. I mean, just to give an example, now we see countries like say Sri Lanka. Also, they do not have much of a domestic, strong domestic economy, and their whole trade balance and the fortunes undergo changes, because this is not something that is going wrong in another country, only one country, but it has a multiple effects across countries, and this is something that repercussion is not cannot be so easily conceptualized through foreign trade multiplier. Okay, basically the foreign trade multiplier as a concept can be expanded to make it more dynamic, but the assumptions that you are making are sometimes making it a little bit a simplistic tool to capture the complex dynamics. Okay, thank you.